Greetings, it is I, the Nomad, live from the wastelands of the internet. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, and we have news, and we're going to continue on with the news. I hope that you're all having a happy New Year. Happy New Year to everybody. Um, it's going to be I suspect, an interesting day today. Just some strange things have been happening, but it is what it is. Let's get to the news, shall we? Israel is winning. Its enemies are powerless to stop it. Really? If any lesson is to be drawn from the assassination of a senior Hamas commander in Beirut this week, it is that Israel never wavers in its quest to hunt down and destroy its foes. Nazi war criminal Adolf Eichmann, a major architect of the Holocaust, no doubt believed he would never be held to account for his crimes after he fled to Argentina and made a new life for himself. That was until his whereabouts were finally identified by the Nazi hunter Simon Wiesenthal, leading to his eventual capture by an elite unit of Israel's Mossad intelligence service. Eichmann was smuggled back to Israel, where in 1962 he was convicted of war crimes and hung. Israel has adopted a similar uncompromising approach to the Palestinian terrorists responsible for carrying out the massacre of Israeli athletes participating in the 1972 Munich Olympic Games. Okay, let's get to this, right? While I agree that Israel is going to try and hunt down these murderous bastards, I have no doubt about that. How's it going, Oz? Um, let me pop this chat out while I'm doing things here. Make it a little easier to see what people are typing to me. How's it going? Um, while I agree that Israel is going to hunt down these bastards, they're not winning this war this way. Okay? Okay? I want you to understand that they're not winning this war this way. And, and I know people are like, well, no man, no man. What do you mean? What do you mean? What I mean is very simple. This is not a war against Hamas. There's this is where the problem with all this lies. There's a serious lack of understanding from these cowards in the West, and I'm calling them cowards. All these people running around, we gotta do a ceasefire. We want to. The thing is, they're not. You're a coward. I'm calling you a coward, and I'm calling you a coward because you're a moral coward. Now, why am I saying that? Am I just you're just a warmonger? You're just a hate-filled warmonger. It has nothing to do with that, and that isn't even true. I wish there was a better way. I truly do. I truly understand what this war is about, and like it or not, I have a better understanding than many of these people who are whinging and crying because you don't want to face the truth. You're too much of a personal coward, a moral coward, to face what the real problem is. Hamas is a symptom. You could kill every single member of Hamas, okay, that is officially labeled as Hamas, and it will make no difference 5 years from now. Rockets will still be raining in. Rockets will still be coming from the Gaza Strip. Rockets will still be coming from Lebanon. Rockets will still be coming from the West Bank. Well, if Israel's not, if they just not oppressing the Palestinians, the Palestinians aren't oppressed. How are the Palestinians being oppressed? Do you even understand what oppression is? Well, they won't give them back their land. They're claiming everything is their land. From the river to the sea, what the hell do you think they're talking about? They're claiming everything. Well, it was all stolen from them. It wasn't stolen from them. There was a series of wars which they participated in, and they lost. And it was a series of wars that, for the most part, they brought on, that they fully endorsed. They just don't like the result. The result was they lost. And I'm not a fan of Israel. For people who think that I'm a fan of Israel, you are so wrong. But you know what Israel isn't doing? Israel is just existing and everyone keeps attacking them. They keep threatening them. Why? Because it's a culture clash. It's a 12th century mentality. The Palestinians do not want to give up their 12th century mentality. They will continue to sit up there and send their children, put bombs on their chests, and send them out to go kill people. They find that totally acceptable. It's an acceptable means of warfare. So what you're fighting is the people's attitude that this is okay, that is an acceptable mentality. Well, how do you change that? How do you change a group of people who are so ruthless and so brutal to their own people, their own children, that mentality is not acceptable? By handing out cookies? Here's a cookie. Then you have this asshole out here. Hamas doesn't want a ceasefire. Recently, I drove along Israel's northern border, west to east. To my American sensibilities, it is the best road trip in Israel, a 90-minute version of a trip that would take many hours on a California back roads from the ocean through scrubby hills and finally to the Golan Heights. These days, there's no illusion of peace, and every few miles I was reminded that across the border in Lebanon is Hezbollah, a threat to that would make Hamas look like a nasty but minor nuisance by comparison. They're not any different. What do you mean it's going to be? They're going to make them look like a nuisance by comparison? Yeah, there's no difference to them. There's literally no difference between Hamas and Hezbollah. But why did I call this guy a jerk? Okay. The war in Gaza is still going on, and reports of Hamas's utter demolition remain exaggerated. This weekend, this group still had enough capability and freedom of movement to fire missiles into central Israel, a fresh war crime, because it made no effort to discriminate between military and civilian targets. The progress of this war and the question of who should administer Gaza after it, and Israeli permanent occupation, the Palestinian Authority, a consortium of Arab states, remains urgent. More urgent, though, is the question of what will happen when the war expands to include Hezbollah and the West Bank. Last week, Yoav Gallant described Israel as already engaged in a multi-front war. I continue to think that Hamas miscalculated badly when it attacked on October 7th and was surprised by the scale of the carnage it wreaked. and the reaction it provoked. Okay? No, I don't think arsenic cookies would work. I don't think that Hamas is surprised about its scale. Okay? The brutality of the Gaza invasion has left Israel largely friendless. At least with its few remaining friends publicly urging for restraint. Hamas has friends too, and it wants them much to join in. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Hamas has friends too, and it wants them to join in. Those on the U.S. college campuses in European capitals calling for a ceasefire are demonstrating their admirable independence of Hamas party line. Bullshit! You are a lying piece of flotsam. You are the reason Hamas is going on with this. They want those people cheering in the streets so they can continue their murderous rampages. You're right in that Hamas doesn't really want a ceasefire. Oh, they want a temporary ceasefire so they can reconsolidate their forces and attack again. That's what they've always wanted. The ability to attack freely. So they send out their puppets on these college campuses that the people like you have turned into mindless little drones. Oh, ow, I want peace. Ow, ow, I don't have to support both sides. Ow, ow, I'm independent. No, you're a moral friggin' coward because you don't want to face what you're dealing with. You can't bring yourselves to look at this situation honestly. You want to know what kind of people? These are things, I want you to understand this, folks. I want you to understand what I'm trying to tell you guys. You guys think that the problem is Hamas? Here, let me read this story to you. Hamas tortured me for dissent. Here's what they really think of Palestinians. An opinion piece from Newsweek. I was born in the Gaza Strip in the late 1990s, one of 6 children. At the time, the Palestinian Authority was the ruling party. My father, like most people in Gaza, was sick of the Palestinian Authority's corruption and was waiting for an alternative. Hamas promised change and reform, and they won the Palestinian Legislative Council elections in 2006. 1 year later, I awoke to the sound of gunfire. Hamas gunmen were fighting Fatah, and they ended up killing more than 600 Palestinians. It became very clear very quickly that Hamas was not the change and reform we hoped for. No, they were exactly the change and reform you hoped for. Okay? With all due respect, they weren't going around going, oh no, there's nothing wrong with us. Okay? Oh, we're going to sit up there and clean up corruption. It wasn't about corruption. That they didn't give a shit. And this guy here doesn't give a shit about corruption. If you'd have cared about corruption, then you should have been walking around going, we got to hold these people accountable and have a trial. You didn't even have that. To silence dissent, Hamas terrorized the citizens of Gaza. What a surprise. On the way to Dar al Akram school I attended in whatever, I can't pronounce the neighborhood, near the Israeli border, a group of masked men carrying Kalashnikovs would check each car. At the end of the year, masked men would open offices in our school to promote Hamas's military camps and register students. I graduated and began my studies at the Islamic University of Gaza. Really? So this wonderful freaking prison camp has the Islamic University of Gaza just working around it, right? You know the concentration camp, the same thing that people think of as gulags. Along with future Hamas leaders and current members, all art classes were replaced with radical Islamic teachings. Uh huh. And elections of the student councils and clubs were only open to Hamas members. Uh huh. Voicing dissent was not an option. Really. Hope and change. Let's sit up there and vote for a leftist organization that has said we are going to kill all Israelis and stated it from the long before, okay, they took over. Hamas was never hiding they were going to war with Israel and wanted Israel exterminated. And yet you walked in there and go, oh, they were hope and change. What was the hope and change you were hoping for? Because it wasn't an end of corruption. Hamas routinely breaks into homes of people deemed disloyal and humiliates them in front of their families and neighbors. Really, I observed all of this with growing horror as a student. Oh, and Hamas's oppression of the Palestinian citizens of Gaza increased. Really? Palestinian oppression? Don't you mean Israeli oppression? Though we knew dissenters were subject to imprisonment, torture, and even murder, in 2019, a few of us decided to join forces and form a protest to voice our opposition to Hamas. We called it We Want to Live demonstration. Our demonstration elicited an extreme reaction by Hamas. They violently cracked down on the protests and all were arrested. I will never forget my first day in jail, walking up to the steps, listening to screams of my colleagues, most of them fellow students who had been arrested before me. I was being held under arrest for 20 I was held under arrest for 21 days and subjected to various types of torture. I was beaten with batons, sprayed with cold water in the late winter nights or hours. My friends didn't fare much better. A Christian friend who was in the next cell, I could hear them screaming at him, "You are a Christian. We don't like the and you don't like the situation? Then go to another country." People's living conditions only got worse. The wealth gap expanded even further. We protested again in 2023 and were crushed in the same manner as in 2019. I was arrested again by Hamas and held for 14 days. This time in a small cell with no bed, no windows, and barely enough space to sit down. I was released on bail on the condition that I would not take part in any further demonstrations. I still expressed my opinion occasionally on social media, all right? But the arrest warrants after each post and continuous threats from Hamas members and accusations of treason made me lose hope that I could make any kind of change. I left Gaza in August to seek a better future for myself and my family. I thought you guys were in a prison. You voted for this, folks. And the vast majority of the people want this. The vast majority of the Palestinians begged for this. We didn't want to be tortured. You supported this bullshit. You supported all their propaganda lies for how long? I think it's hard for Israelis to understand that there are many innocent people in Gaza who have suffered as much from Hamas's evils as they have. I understand those Israelis. During my life as a Gazan, the only thing I believed about Israelis was that they all hate us and want to eliminate us as Palestinians. Gee, what a surprise. as a moron, okay, you believed this. You believed you could attack with Israel with impunity with Hamas and the rest of the Palestinian group, right? Never. You, you say that you were going to protest Hamas. Sure, sure. You were going to protest Hamas till you took over and did the exact same thing they did. Now I have a better understanding of what they're thinking. I made friends with Israelis for the first time after October 7th. It has. It turns out that many of them, just like me, want this conflict to end so they can live in peace. These friendships have opened my eyes to their suffering. Now I have a better understanding of what they're thinking and have decided to never make judgments before listening to the other side. Oh, isn't that so sweet? You see, and I say it like that, hey, Nimble Horse. I say it like that, and I realize that this guy's been brutalized and that he was living under a different society and everything else. But he's a human being, folks. He knew better. He knows. He knew. He knew growing up that what they were like and what they're treating like. But the problem is exactly what he's speaking to. Their culture is the issue. It's not Hamas. Hamas is the symptom of a bankrupt, murderous culture with modern weaponry. We don't live in the 12th century anymore, and they have not adapted their culture to live peacefully with anyone else aside from them. Period. Whether it's Hamas, this ruler, that ruler, won't make a bit of difference to these people. Because culturally, it hasn't changed. You notice how this son of a bitch never sits up there and expresses, all right, the fact that he had religious education and that the religion sit up there and props this bullshit up. Do you notice how? Oh yeah, well I see how they see things now. But you haven't rejected the other parts of it, have you? Oh, he's very good about this. But where's his attack on the culture going on? Oh, he's great for sitting there saying, "Well, Hamas brutalized me, so therefore I'm against Hamas." Nothing else. He may be willing to ignore freaking Christians, okay, but he has no problem with them being brutalized unless they're a friend of his. See, the idea that Israel is winning this war, the idea that the Palestinian Hamas is the enemy. Okay, it's all a farce, folks, because that isn't the real problem. The problem is the culture of the Palestinians, and it's a culture they want to keep. It's a culture they don't want to change. They would rather strap bombs onto their children and use them as weapons platforms than change the philosophy and let somebody else live in peace. And understand this, peace is not the absence of conflict. This is another misnomer. Peace is the absence of threat. You could stop the fighting. You can stop fighting, all right? But it's just a prelude to another fight. Because what they'll do is they'll say, if you don't do what we tell you, we'll beat you. And after they get done beating you, you better do what we tell you from now on. See, that's not peace. And that's who Hamas is. But what's more is that's who the Palestinians are. That's their culture. The PLA or the PLO were no different. They weren't any different. And I want to say one more thing. In the Gaza Strip, all these buildings and everything, the universities and everything, these are supposedly refugee camps funded by the United States and the UN. Yet these vile creatures spew hatred toward all of us. Personally, we need to cut the UN off at the knees and say, no more funding to the UN. Get the hell out. You want to end this conflict? You want people to start seeing what life is really like? Well, it's very easy. Cut off their funding. It's real easy. Remove the UN. You gotta stop the humanitarian crisis. They want to live in peace. People just want to live in peace. You're not showing it. Why are they not sitting up there saying, hey, wait a minute here, okay, we need to put a stop to this. We need to put a stop to Hamas. How come these vast numbers of innocent people haven't sit up there and stood up to Hamas? You want to know why? Because there's not vast numbers of these people who are innocent in this regard. He took a stand. He took a stand, and he was trying to take a stand that wasn't even religious. And what was the result? The culture crushed him. The culture chased him out of where he lived. And he was all for still living there, folks, which is fine. I understand that philosophy from people wanting to live where they grew up. But don't tell me he was trying to make a better life for himself. Don't tell me he was trying to sit up there and do this. Oh no, he wanted an end to the Hamas being in charge. But he wasn't going to change the culture. He had no intention of changing the culture. He wasn't going out there saying, hey, we have to start changing our way of thinking. We can't be listening to this rhetoric of a jihad. With all due respect to the guy, look, I understand what you're doing, but it is what it is. In another war front, state propaganda. Ukrainians shun TV news as war drags on. Really? Okay, let's read this story here. Yes, I've already read it. Right? Since the early days of Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022, the people of the Ukraine have had access to a single source of television and news. An all-day broadcast packed with footage of Ukrainian tanks blasting Russian positions, medics operating near the front line, and political leaders rallying support abroad. The show, Telemarathon, United News, right, has been a major tool of Ukraine's information war, praised by the government officials who regularly appear on it for its role in countering Russian disinformation and maintaining morale. It's a weapon, said President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine's last January, or said last January on the program, which is jointly produced and broadcast 24/7 by the country's biggest television channels. But after nearly 2 years of war, Ukrainians have grown weary of telemarathon. What was once seen as a crucial tool for holding the country together is now increasingly derided as little more than a mouthpiece for the government. Tell me it isn't so. Viewers have complained that the program often paints too rosy a picture of the war, hiding worrying developments on the front line and the West eroding support for the Ukraine, and ultimately failing to prepare citizens for a long war. That's because everyone and nobody thought that this war would take a long time. Okay? Nobody. And when I say nobody, I mean nobody. Not Putin. Putin is as surprised by the length and breadth of this war, all right, as everyone else is. Everyone thought that this war was going to be a quick rollover, all right, of the Ukrainians. Let's be perfectly frank. Even most Ukrainians were worried about that part. But once they stopped the Russian bear, once they were able to get weapons to at least stave off immediate destruction, they expected the Russian bear, all right, to just turn around and go home. And it's continuing. And Biden and the NATO supporters for this war, all right, all thought that all you had to do was bloody the nose of Putin and he would back off. They don't understand their enemy. This is the problem. You can say what you want about the Ukrainians and Zelensky. You can say what you want about Putin and the Russians and the Russian military, okay? But it is now a meat grinder, okay? And it's a meat grinder. Putin and the Russian people as a whole, not saying there aren't people that disagree with it, okay? But the Russian people as a whole mean to win. And you'd better start coming to the understanding of, yes, they intend to win this battle. They intend to win this war. Now, what will victory mean? Will it mean the collapse of the Ukrainians? Possibly. But you know what won't happen? I can tell you this right now. What won't happen is Russia will not pull back, period. Not from the Donetsk region, not from frickin' Crimea. They will not pull back. They may tactically pull back temporarily in an area, but they're always going to come rushing back, all right, as soon as there's any kind of option to allow them to do it. And the Ukrainians, as patriotic as many of them are, and as stalwart as many of them are, and fighting the good fight as many of them are, they can do this for as long as it takes in their minds, but it will not matter in the end. And I know people don't want to hear that, but it will not make the difference that they think it will in the end. And the reason for that is because from Russia's standpoint, it's strategic to their very survival that they keep control of the Ukraine. And before somebody sits up there and goes, "All right, Putin's just a murderous dictator," Zelensky's no different. Hey, Sixer, let me know if you want to come in. Just pop on over. But the Ukrainians here, let me pull up another little goodie here for you, okay? As losses mount, Ukrainians fiercely debate future of the draft. After an initial outpouring of patriotism in the months after the Russian invasion began, the realities of the battlefield mobilization have largely set in among the Ukraine's population. Heavy casualties. I thought they, they, they weren't sustaining heavy casualties. Heavy casualties and almost 2 years of grinding trench warfare have sparked a fierce debate on the future of the draft, an ever more pertinent topic as the Army struggles to fill its ranks. President Volodymyr Zelensky warned last month that the military wanted to mobilize at least 500,000 people to battle the 600 or 1,000 or so Russian soldiers deployed in the Ukraine. But he said he needed to hear more arguments before making a decision, given how delicate the subject is in the nation exhausted by fighting and a flagging counteroffensive launched last summer. Ukraine, which consists roughly of 850,000 soldiers among its ranks, does not reveal losses or the number of soldiers deployed at the front. Yet the military sectors of the Ukrainian cemeteries continue to grow. The latest U.S. estimates published in August by the New York Times put the death toll at nearly 70,000 and the number of wounded up to 120,000. That is bullshit. Okay? Now, why am I saying that? Okay? Because historically, the number of wounded, okay, isn't just double to the number of dead. It's closer to between 5 and 10 times the number of dead. So you're looking, in my opinion, probably around 350,000 wounded. You know what else you're not hearing any more about? Have you noticed all the quote unquote mercenary brigades that people talked about, how they're not being talked about anymore? There was close to 50 to 60,000 people, all right, that were forming brigades to sit up there and fight the Russians, all right, that were foreigners, mercenaries that were going in there to take care of this. How come you're not hearing about them anymore? Why do you think that is? Could it be because they don't exist anymore? Could it be because they've all left? Could that be the reason? The patriotic impetus of the early months when Ukrainians went in mass to the front voluntarily is no longer there. More and more often, stories of men desperately seeking to evade the draft appear in Ukrainian media. In December, the government submitted a draft bill to parliament, lowering the draft age of military service from 27 to 25, simplifying the process of enlistment. But the bill cut compulsory wartime service from an unlimited period to 36 months. It also introduced new penalties for draft dodgers, like restrictions on driver's licenses. Ukraine's human rights ombudsman, Dmytro Lubinets, okay, has warned the ever increasing penalties pose a problem. We cannot get to the point where, by fighting Russia, we turn it into something similar to Russia. You're already similar to Russia, folks. I'm personally against harsh penalties like confiscating property. Sure you are. How are you gonna get people to fight? Ruling party lawmaker Marina Bezugla, all right, suggested exempting people from mobilization in exchange for a substantial donation to the budget. And those who don't have any money, let them croak in the trenches and let their children become orphans. Orphans, one person commented on the deputy's Facebook page. War is for the poor, said another. Server IRL. Hey, Maddie, welcome. Come on in if you want. The war is going to continue. It is becoming winter now. The Russians will begin their winter offensive, just like they always do, just like they have since World War II. Two. Just like they did in the Korean conflict when they stood up there were convincing the Chinese when to attack. You ever notice their big offensives always begin in the wintertime? Now, they're fighting against people who are the same as they are, with the exception of that they have U.S. weaponry. And U.S. weaponry is superior on one basis, all right? U.S. and Western weaponry is superior to Russian weaponry. We all know that. But how much weaponry are you going to continue to use? And when you're completely outnumbered and completely outmanned, what difference is that going to make? Especially when you can't use it, when those weapon systems were not created to be used in the manner in which they're being used. Oh, you can read all sorts of accounts of how, the M1 Bradleys or the M2 Bradleys are just kicking the crap out of the Russians, and the Russians just keep sending armor and waves, and they're losing and they're losing. The Russians aren't stupid. Okay? They're not. And yes, they probably are losing more men and material than the Ukrainians are on a man for man basis. They did against the Germans in World War II too, as well. They understand the meat grinder effect, but you don't have a combined arms capability to maximize the effectiveness of the Western system of warfare that these systems were created for. I understand why people are nervous about Putin. I understand all of that. But at the same time, you can't ignore the fact that what this actually is a freaking civil war. And we really don't have a dog in the fight. And we can't just keep supplying money and weapons in a failed effort to keep propping this thing up when our own debt is so far out of control. At some point, probably in the next 2 to 3 years, you're going to there's going to be a push to tell Zelensky to come off of his stance of I want all the territory back and accept the fact that the Donetsk region and the Crimea are now Russian. It is what it is. All right, let's switch gears. Come to the U.S. for a little bit. How a major university discriminated against white and Asian candidates. Oh, look, it's a W. The University of Washington has revealed that an internal whistleblower exposed the discrimination against white and Asian job candidates in its psychology faculty. An internal report found that a third placed job applicant who was black was given a tenure track assistant professor job last April above white and Asian candidates who were ranked higher in the selection process. Other violations included excluding white staff from meetings with job candidates, deleting a passage from a hiring report to hide discrimination, and discussing ways to think our way around a Supreme Court ruling that barred affirmative action on colleges. Now, why am I bringing this up? I mean, most of you guys are like, well, that's obvious. All these universities are bad. And they are. Why? Because of this. This big W here. The big University of Washington. You want to know why? The University of Washington is in this step. It's because of the other dreaded thing that leftists absolutely hate: money from football. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, University of Washington's football program in college is going to be playing for the college football national championship. And there are millions and I'm thinking hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue to the college. And that's why, okay, it's time to attack them. This story would have been buried and never seen the light of day, except for the fact that they're saying two things. One, we got to pull what's been happening to our great institutions like Harvard and Yale and all these people. We got to pull that out off of there because there are people being mad at us. The all right. First of all, for those who don't know, the history of Russia as an empire begins in Kiev. Okay, the old monarchy of the Russians begins in Kiev. So the idea that Ukrainians are somehow not part of Russian history, they've always been a part of. They are ethnically different. I'm not saying that they're not. But when you talk about the Russian Empire, they've always been an integral part of it. It's just one of those things. Now, but back to this: the University of Washington is being talked about in this manner. All right, strictly to try and take attention away from what's been happening in Harvard and MIT and everything after their professors gotten in so much trouble and their presidents gotten so much trouble. All right, being anti-Semitic. Okay, and I don't say that lightly. Okay, I don't say that lightly. I think a lot of the biggest problem that the universities like Gay and the rest of them, as far as the problems that they've had, and trust me, those people, Gay, oh, she resigned and is still getting $900,000 from Harvard. Okay, so the idea that somehow she is not making out like a bandit. She trust me, she is not being harmed by this controversy personally in any way, shape, or form. And of course, she blames "quote unquote" it's discriminatory, white, it's white supremacy that's causing this to happen to me. No, it's because of your own bigotry, dude. Okay, it's your own bigotry that has caused this problem for yourself, and it's going to continue. All right, because they have no intention of actually changing. All right, but the only reason that the University of Washington is getting hit with this, all right, is because they need to sit up there and try and prop up these "quote unquote" great, you know, educational institutions of the United States. Personally, they've had their time. These are no longer the great institutions that people thought of them as. They are no longer these great places of learning. They gave up their academic prowess a long time ago in favor of Marxist philosophy. They have no standards. And they can whinge, they can cry, they can do everything, they can say whatever the hell they want. It's not going to make a difference. People now know who these people really are. But as far as discrimination goes on college campus, it's a codified thing. It's a codified thing. High-end sex ring in Boston and DC areas were honeypot schemes by Russia, China, South Korea, and even Israel to ensnare U.S. officials, intelligence experts believe. What? What? Really? Intelligent. Who are these intelligent experts? I really want to. Intelligent experts are becoming increasingly convinced that 6 high-end brothels in the suburbs of Boston and Washington, D.C. were set up by a foreign nation as an espionage honey trap. What? Right. Eric Swalwell. What? They believe the brothels, allegedly masterminded by the 41-year-old South Korean woman, targeted politicians, high ranking government officials, and defense contractors. Oh, really? But the mystery is which country was behind the scheme? Russia, China, Korea itself, or even Israel are all seen as possibly being behind the scheme. How about all of them together? Having the Koreans out front could have been a false flag to give China or some other country plausible deniability if the plot unraveled, said one-time CIA senior operations officer told the Daily Mail in an exclusive interview. The brothels were raided in November, and prosecutors said they were looking to charge 28 people in Massachusetts alone. Joshua Levy, an acting U.S. attorney for the state, said his office will seek accountability for the buyers who fuel the commercial sex industry. No, you're not. You're going to freaking let these Johns walk. Okay, if they can find people that aren't part of the establishment, they'll probably grab a few of those and hold them up as tokens. But as far as that, but that's it, right? The Ring's clients, who paid rates of up to $600 an hour, included corporate executives, professors, lawyers, and scientists. To entice customers, Lee's allegedly set up websites whose purported purpose was helping photographers find nude female models looking for work. Investigators believe the Ring had made more than $1 million by the time it was busted. Hey, good morning, Sean. More like the FBI. You're bustling into our territory. Oh my gosh. What a surprise. It's kind of like this story. These San Francisco leaders want to sue California, saying it unfairly targeting the city in a housing policy. What? San Francisco supervisors Aaron Peskin and Connie Chan want the city attorney to sue the state of California over what they say are efforts led by State Senator Scott Wiener to singularly penalize the city in its efforts to build market rate housing. In a letter sent to the city's attorney on December 26, Chan and Peskin argue that the city has long been committed to building housing, especially affordable housing, and has taken steps to do so by dedicating hundreds of millions of dollars of public funds to housing construction, streamlining permitting processes, and approving over 70,000 new units. And it hasn't lowered the price? You mean all this hasn't worked? Oh, it gets better, folks. But they say a new state law championed by Wiener, all right, a lawmaker from San Francisco and a former city supervisor, has put a target on the city while letting neighborhood jurisdictions fall woefully short in creating any significant new housing at all. What? Oh no! How can you say that? Say it as a sound. Oh my god. Supervisors are calling out Wiener's bill, SB 423, which allows developers to request streamlined approval of their housing projects without going through the jurisdiction's review process that allow for public comment on the development. The bill also punished cities like San Francisco for failing to meet their housing goals. Wiener, all right, pushed through other bills to spur housing development, but critics have said they do not make enough affordable housing for moderate and low income people. Oh, tell me it isn't so, folks. Tell me it isn't so. Okay, let's get on to the next story. Christmas tree attacker busted for vase assault. Or was that a vase? That's a very expensive vase. Anyway, um, days after allegedly beating her boyfriend with a Christmas tree, a Florida woman hit the same victim in the face with a glass vase on New Year's Day. Miracle Rivera, 20, was arrested yesterday and charged with battering the victim inside of the Largo residence of the couple shares. The January 1st attack, cops say, occurred during an argument between Rivera, seen at the right, and her 24-year-old boyfriend. A glass flower vase strike left the man with visible injuries to his face, according to a criminal complaint. Rivera was charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, a felony, for the 6:45 a.m. vase incident. She was also hit with misdemeanor domestic battery count for allegedly scratching the victim's face and abdomen earlier that morning. Rivera, seen at the right, is locked up in the county jail without bond and is scheduled this afternoon for an initial court appearance. Following her December 24th bust for the tree attack, Rivera was freed from jail on Christmas Day on her own recognizance. As part of her release terms, Rivera was ordered by the judge to have no illegal contact with the victim. Oh my God. Think positive, folks. Think positive. What? We're back to this again. RFK Jr. says corruption has been normalized as Sam Bankman Fried escapes additional charges. Federal prosecutors have decided not to pursue additional criminal charges against Sam Bankman Fried that were not covered in his previous trial. What happened? According to the Wall Street Journal report, a letter from the U.S. District Judge Lewis Kaplan's federal prosecutors on Friday wrote, the government has concluded that the public interest in a prompt resolution to this matter outweighs the interest in holding a separate trial. Except for the fact that all the things that are part of this are funding allegations for DNC. Isn't it funny how the government prosecutors all say, "Oh no, we just think a prompt resolution is in the public's best interest because see this would drag the DNC into money laundering." And RFK Jr. says, "Oh well, this corruption has been normalized." Really? Tell me, Rob. Okay, tell me, Robert. This is one of the reasons why I can't stand him. Okay, because he's not wrong, but at the same time, where were you? Okay. What, I know people are like, no, man, no, man. What are you saying? What do you mean? What are you saying? No illegal contact. Yeah, that's funny. Okay. Sam Bankman-Fried donated $100 million of stolen customer funds to U.S. politicians. Today, the government announced they were dropping 6 charges against SBF and will not prosecute him for political campaign finance violations. Why? Because they know who this money went to. Okay, but what gets me irritated about people like Robert F. Kennedy, okay, was where were you during the Clinton administration? Where were you? You're saying that corruption has been normalized. Well, who was normalizing the corruption? It was people like you who didn't step up and say, "Wait a minute here. We can't have a president suborning perjury from people. We can't have a situation where the people in the DNC, a Democrat, part of the party you were given money to, part of the party you were funding for decades and decades to, right? We can't have these people making statements like, well, what he did was wrong, what he did was criminal, what he did was impeachable. I just don't want to impeach him." And who was that? Oh, that was the conscience of the Senate at the time, Joe Lieberman. But the Republicans, but the Republicans. But nothing. What have you done to clean up corruption in your own party? You already have the press, which hides the corruption, which approves of the corruption. It's a major part of the problem. And what the hell is this? Alaska Airlines flight makes emergency landing after window blows out mid-flight as a child who sat near the holes loses a shirt. An Alaska Airlines flight turned into a nightmare when a section of the plane blew out mid-flight, reportedly sucking out passengers' belongings and forcing the pilot to make an emergency landing in Portland. Thank God that nobody got killed. The Ontario to California bound plane departed Portland International Airport at 4:52 p.m. Friday, but returned just 35 minutes later after a terrifying ordeal, according to the data from the flight tracking website FlightAware. Shortly after takeoff, the flight, which had 171 passengers and 6 crew members aboard, experienced an incident. experienced an incident. All right. Passengers described the chaos as people's cell phones and belongings were sucked out of a gaping hole in the plane. One passenger told KPTV that a child had to be held down in his seat by his mother. And I truly believe that. Okay. The same child who was sitting closest to the damaged part of the plane lost his shirt and his skin was reddened by the wind. Photos obtained by KTPV show a massive chunk missing in the plane's fuselage. This looks like an emergency escape hatch blew. Right? Immediately after the police blew off, oxygen masks were deployed and used by passengers as they waited for the plane to land. Several on board who declined to give their names told the outlet. Recordings of the flight's pilot captured the moments after the plane part was blown off, depressurizing the cabin. Portland approach Alaska 1282 emergency. The aircraft is now leveling at 12,000 feet and is in a left turn headed 340. The Alaska Airlines pilot said, "We are emergency, we are depressurized, and we do need to return back to we have 177 passengers. Fuel is 18.8. The pilot called out for the air traffic controller after being granted clearance to a lower altitude. The fire department responded to the plane after it landed and treated many minor injuries. One person was taken from the scene for medical evaluations, said the Port of Portland told KPTV. The plane landed safely, made an emergency landing at Portland Airport. American Airlines and airport officials confirmed the Boeing 737 9 MAX was recently built and obtaining its airworthiness certificate on October 25th, 2023. This is a brand new friggin' plane. Okay, There are questions here, folks. There are some serious questions. How does a door get blown out? There's got to be some serious questions as to what the hell was happened here. Thank God no one died. And it's great that the pilots were able to pull this thing and get it under control and actually return safely after half an hour. But I'm going to tell you right now, a new plane with something like that, generally when something like that happens, it's one of two things. Either it's a it's an engineering problem, which is serious. Okay? It's either an engineering problem or somebody did something to that door to cause it to blow off. Okay? I'm just pointing this out. New planes don't just go in the middle of nowhere. All right? Without it either being there's a problem in the engineering, okay, or something along those lines. This thing has been flying since October, 2 whole months. 2 whole months this thing's been in service and it blew out. Surprised they weren't attacked by it. This isn't good, folks. I'm just putting it out there. This isn't good. SpaceX accused of unlawfully firing employees who criticized Elon Musk. How is it unlawful to fire when you sit up there and criticize the boss? A U.S. labor agency has accused SpaceX of unlawfully firing employees who penned an open letter critical of Elon Musk and creating an impression that workers' activities were under surveillance by the rocket ship company. Of course! Gee, your boss doesn't know what you want to do. The letter, among other workplace concerns, called on executives to condemn. They're calling for a revolt within the company. Okay, and yet somehow the firing of these people was illegal. Are you insane, folks? The letter, among other workplace concerns, called on executives to condemn Musk's public behavior on Twitter, which had nothing to do with the company. All right, the platform known as Twitter, all right, or X on the platform known as Twitter, and hold everyone accountable for unacceptable misconduct. Musk's actions included making light of sexual harassment allegations against him, which the billionaire denied. As our CEO and most prominent spokesman, Elon is seen as the face of SpaceX. Every tweet that Elon sends is a de facto public statement by the company, though the open letter said at the time. The letter also referred to Musk's actions as a frequent source of distraction and embarrassment. A total of 9 employees were soon terminated for their involvement in the letter. I have no problem with this, according to the November 22 filing, all right, made on behalf of one of the employees to the National Labor Relations Board, although only 8 were included in Wednesday's complaint. In addition to the firings, the complaint accuses SpaceX of interrogating other workers about the letter. No shit! Announcing that employees were terminated for their participation in the letter and inviting employees to quit if they disagreed. I really don't have a problem with any of this. The complaint also alleges that some were shown screenshots of communications between employees about the letter, which created an impression among SpaceX's employees that their protected, concerted activities were under surveillance. You were doing this in the company. You're doing this within the company, and you expect it. Oh my Hawthorne, the Hawthorne, California, a company has until mid-January to respond to the complaint, according to Wednesday's filing. The complaint marks the NLRB's first step toward litigating these allegations and seeking a settlement. If a settlement isn't reached, a hearing is scheduled to begin on March 5th in Los Angeles. Uh, yeah, I think that if Elon Musk is going to tell you to go pound sand, folks. He's just going to tell you to go pound sand. Oh, this'll have him running. Yeah, this'll do it. Philadelphia Mayor Sherelle Parker declares public safety emergency. Oh, that'll stop the criminals. That'll stop them. In her first official act since being inaugurated on Tuesday, Philadelphia Mayor Sherelle L. Parker signed an executive order declaring a citywide public safety emergency and directing the police department to develop comprehensive plans to address crime across the city. You see, you have to address the crime, not the criminals. You have to address the crime. The order directs the new police commissioner, Kevin Bethel, all right, to work with managing director Adam Thiel and other city department heads to deliver a plan within 100 days detailing how they will hire more police officers, reduce violent crime, quell quality of life offenses, and permanently shut down all pervasive open air drug markets. Is it just me or just walking in there going, I want these people arrested and put in jail for their criminal activity? Next! We need to study this. We need a plan. We need to come up with a commission. Oh, we need to hire more police officers. Where was Cheryl a few years ago? All right, when they were all screaming, police brutality. Where is it? The declaration was one of a trio of executive orders Parker signed Tuesday, hours after her formal inauguration. She also signed an order that will make the city's government more visible, responsive, and effective in how it delivers services to its citizens and constituents. And another that removes barrier to employment, including some college degree requirements. Oh, the criminals are running scared. Boy, howdy. This next story is kind of interesting in a way. Every member of a police force resigns after a tribal agency arrives for an assessment. Horton, Kansas, WIBW. Every member of a Kansas police department walked out on the job or officially resigned after a government agency arrived for a department assessment. Meeting minutes from the City of Horton's December 18th City Commission meeting indicate that the Kickapoo tribe in Kansas, Chairwoman Gail Cheatham, all right, informed commissioners that the entire Kickapoo tribe police department resigned on Monday, December 4th. Chairwoman Cheatham told commissioners that every single member of the police force walked out except for one who did give a 2 weeks notice. According to Cheatham, the tribal council had contacted the Bureau of Indian Affairs Law Enforcement Division as it requested technical aid and a comprehensive departmental assessment. However, the BIA arrived when the BIA arrived at the station, the entire police force, save for one, just walked out. Currently, Cheatham noted that the Brown County Sheriff's Office and Kansas Bureau of Investigation are patrolling the reservation in the police department's absence. The chairwoman also told commissioners that all members of the Kickapoo Fire Department and are EMS certified and will respond to calls as well. Cheatham indicated that the Bureau of Indian Affairs would soon be on site to aid the interview process for new police officers. Not one thing tells you what the beef was. In this story, not one iota in this entire story from KCTV Kansas City tells you why these officers walked off the job. Was it because they're being investigated for corruption? Was it because they think that the Bureau of Indian Affairs wants to sit up there and hammer them with some kind of leftist policy? We don't know. Now, I will say this. If it's a corruption issue, why did you go to the BIA? If it's a corruption issue, and this is why I lean in a different direction. Instead of going to the Bureau of Indian Affairs, I should have went to the FBI, which has authority. Just putting it out there. I would like to know what's going on with this. Women struck father, 73, over beeping sound made by his oxygen machine. A woman punched her father in the head during an argument Christmas morning about the beeping sound made by the 73-year-old victim's oxygen machine, police allege. According to an arrest affidavit, Christina Grandos, 49, all right, admitted to striking her parent when questioned by cops who responded to around 5 a.m. to the Lady Lake, Florida home at Grandos shares with her father. The victim told officers he argued with his daughter about the oxygen machine making a beeping sound before Grandos punched him in the left side. Hey, hang on just a second, folks. I'm just going to go. I got to do something real quick. So just hang on. Sorry about that. A little dead air. Sorry about that, folks. No, but this is just the pair quarreled over his oxygen machine and due to the way that her father was speaking to her. As first reported in the Village News, Grandos, seen above, was arrested for battery of a person over 65, which is a felony. She spent Christmas in jail, all right, from which she was released following the afternoon after posting $1,000 bond. Grandos is scheduled for a January 22nd arraignment and has been ordered by the judge to have no contact with her father. Yeah, okay. uh, I can understand why the beep, beep, beep would annoy the hell out of you, but at the same time, leave. Just say, you know what, I gotta walk away from that dang thing. It's driving me crazy. But they hit your dad over the head because he's on oxygen? Anyway. NRA fights fading influence as longtime leader resigns. The National Rifle Association, a one-time lobbying powerhouse, is heading into a civil trial over fraud and mismanagement allegations without its longtime leader. The Big Picture, the group whose CEO announced his resignation on Friday, is attempting to stave off declining luster and impact in Washington. All right, quick to catch up. Quick up, quick up catch up quick. Excuse me. Wayne LaPierre, who has led the organization since 1991, announced that he's stepping down as CEO just days before he and other NRA members are set to face a civil trial in New York. Okay, Loretta James, all right, filed a lawsuit in 2020 accusing LaPierre and other officials of fraud and mismanagement. The NRA has denied any wrongdoing. The trial is set to begin on Monday and is expected to last 6 weeks per NBC News. All right, I'm going to be real blunt with you. Bye. Okay, Wayne LaPierre needed to go a long time ago. He basically took an organization, he increased its funding, but then he basically, because of his aggressive tactics, right, drove people away from the organization, completely drove them out. Okay, it was the leading gun rights organization in the country, but because of his actions, he drove a lot of people to end their membership with the NRA, their long-standing membership, and people walked away and never wanted to come back. So the idea that the NRA is getting hammered here, and the Wayne LaPierre resigned, good. From Showbiz 411, okay. Jimmy Kimmel threatens legal action against Aaron Rodgers after the quarterback suggests talk show host name might be on the Epstein list. Not quite. Okay. Jimmy Kimmel is threatening legal action against the New York Jets quarterback Aaron Rodgers. Apparently, Rodgers suggested on ESPN's Pat McAfee show, all right, this afternoon, that Kimmel's name might be on the list of Jeffrey Epstein's associates that was about to be released. He said, "There's a lot of people, including Jimmy Kimmel, who are really hoping that this doesn't come out. I'll tell you what, if that list comes out, I definitely will be popping some sort of bottle." Okay, um, Jimmy Kimmel's name is not in the Epstein list, as far as I know. There's several installments of this list coming out, but as far as I know, his name is not on the list. But that's not where the beef was either. See, this is a misnomer being told by people. Okay, the problem is who one of good old Jimmy's best friends happens to be. One of one of Jimmy Kimmel's best friends is a man who was this personal chef of Jeffrey Epstein, who served food and so forth at these parties, all right, that were being hosted on Lolita Island. Okay, so he had tried to claim that, oh, his friend had nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein, didn't know anything about it. But the woman who is the central figure in this testimony on that list, okay, claims that not only was he there, he was actually serving food to these people that were underaged, okay, and that he was he was more than just you know an acquaintance of Jeffrey's Epstein, and that he was fully aware of what was going on there. I don't know. I wasn't there. All right, and to be honest, what I've seen, and I'm going to be real blunt, what I've seen remains hearsay. Okay, and it's not that I don't believe that these things were not taking place, that these things were taking place. Okay, I do believe that they were taking place. Okay, but the problem with this is you got Jimmy Kimmel bitching and whining because Aaron Rodgers made a joke at his expense, and this guy has been an asshole, meaning Jimmy Kimmel, all right, for a long time about Brett, or not Brett, I just said Brett Favre, not Brett Favre, but Aaron Rodgers not giving the COVID shot. Now, if you're going to make fun of Aaron Rodgers for not taking a COVID shot and calling him out on it and calling him all sorts of freaking stupid names and doing all sorts of stupid things, all right, in an effort to quote unquote get laughs because he's a public figure. Well, Jimmy, you know, people with glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Now, I'm not saying you were on the island, all right? But you'd better start developing some thick skin if you're going to sit up there and go after other people who are going to use whatever means they can, right, to come after you. And that's what's happening. So, on to the next story. I love this story. From Slate, a far-right court just admitted a truth about that abortion foes want to hide. When the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, it claimed to be removing the judiciary from the abortion debate. In reality, it simply gave the courts a macabre new task, deciding how far states can push the a patient toward death before allowing her to undergo an emergency abortion. That's bullshit. Okay? On Tuesday, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit Court offered its own answer, declaring that Texas may prohibit hospitals from providing stabilizing treatment to pregnant patients by performing an abortion, withholding the procedure until their condition deteriorates to the point of grievous serious injury or near certain death. The rule proves what we already know. Roe's demise has transformed the judiciary into a kind of death panel that holds the power to elevate the potential of life of a fetus over an actual life of a patient. When does life begin? Who wrote this? Hey, coward Mark. Okay, Mark Joseph Stern. Hey, you fucking coward. You freaking moral piece of shit. When does human life begin? Oh, you use a term like fetus, but when does a patient's life go transition from being a fetus into a human? I would love to hear your reasoning and your philosophy of when human life begins, because this has been and continues to be the problem. And I'm going to say one more thing. The judiciary isn't making these decisions. The legislative branches are. And here's where the rub still comes back to. If you want, okay, your legislature to make a decision, let it make the decision and then argue about, and then if they make the decision the wrong way, work to sit up there and get the people overturned so they can make the decision the way you want. So it can be legislated how you desire. You see, you have no dog in this fight, Mark, unless you live in Texas. And the U.S. court has no business making a decision in this ruling, all right? Because it's what the legislature decides. When does human life begin? When is it appropriate, all right, for the state to deem a human life to be taken? And before somebody says something and goes, "What are you talking? No, man, what are you referring to?" Well, they do it all the time, folks. What do you think the death penalty is about? We have a long history of the state determining when it's appropriate, all right, to end a human life within its society. Right, wrong, indifferent, whether you agree with them or don't agree with them, all right, that has been the role of governments since time immemorial. And it's going to continue. To sit up there and say that the justices are, there's more lawsuits and everything else, well, then stop bringing the lawsuits. You leftist loon. Just put it in there. Because terms like stabilizing are nebulous. Okay? It's a nebulous term. Stabilizing for what? You see, when it comes to this whole abortion issue, I'm going to be real blunt. Who is going to bring to court an illegal abortion? I want you to think on that. If a woman is having a procedure, okay, in the doctor's office, who's going to sit up there and say, well, that doctor has performed that abortion illegally? The nurse? Another doctor? Who is it that's going to bring it to the attention of the authorities that this was a case like this? The husband, the mother, the person who's getting the abortion? Who is it that's going to bring this case up? How is this case going to go to court? No, I can think of some ways, right? Not the least of which is a woman comes back from a hospital visit and tells her husband, "Oh, I had an abortion." And tells her boyfriend, "I had an abortion," and he then says, "Well, wait a minute, that was illegal," and then brings it up to the police so they can start a quote unquote investigation. I can see that happening. I can also see it happening from another relative of some sort, so they're getting involved. But my point is that the idea that this is going to stop what's going on in the country, unfortunately, okay, it's not. And if a woman needs quote unquote stabilization, why don't they fly her out of Texas and fly her on over to Arkansas, or fly her on up to Kansas or Oklahoma, or even better yet, just fly her across the border into New Mexico, where they have a very liberal policy on abortion. Nothing's stopping them from doing that. I'm not advocating it. I do think it's something to understand, though. The courts need to be put in their place, and what has to happen in these legislatures is the legislature has to define human life. Don't leave it up to the courts. Man 32 busted for allegedly poultry pelting at a Wawa store, claiming that his food order was not properly cooked. An aggrieved customer struck a Wawa worker with a piece of chicken covered with a spicy Nashville sauce that got into the victim's eyes, said police. Right? The 1:20 a.m. confrontation yesterday at Wawa's convenience store in St. Petersburg, Florida, resulted in the arrest of Daniel Palomino, a 32, on misdemeanor battery charge. Palomino, police say, became upset because he believed that the chicken was not cooked completely. He then confronted the worker and responded by throwing the chicken on the victim. While the chicken was covered with spicy Nashville sauce and got into the victim's eye, the Wawa employee did not suffer any bodily harm, noted the noted the cops. Palomino, who lives about a mile from the Wawa, was under the influence of alcohol when confronted by the sheriff's deputies. Seen above, he was booked in the county jail, from which he was released Sunday afternoon after posting $500 bond. The chicken was not seized as evidence, though police did confiscate a baseball bat from Palomino, whose rap sheet includes convictions for cocaine possession, aggravated assault, theft, possession of drug paraphernalia, criminal mischief, marijuana possession, and probation violations. Didn't like your chicken. All right, two stories left, folks. The Miami Zoo announces the birth of two sloth bear cubs. The Florida Zoo announced the births of two baby sloth bears, the first members of their species to be born in the zoo since 1998. The zoo announced Friday that the 4-year-old first-time mother Kimate, all right, who came to the facilities from the Philadelphia Zoo in 2021, gave birth to the first cub in a secluded area behind her public habitat at 4 a.m. on December 4th. The second cub followed at 9:30 a.m. The cubs were, which are female, were fathered by an 11-year-old Hank, who is also who they also mark his first surviving cubs, the zoo announced. The sloth bears, native to the Indian subcontinent, are the first to be born at the zoo in Miami since 1998. Kimati will remain off exhibit, secluded in her den with the cubs to help ensure that they are able to continue to establish a strong bond with minimal interruptions and distractions. Um, okay, cute little thing until you see. Look at the size of the claws on this thing. Holy cow! This looks like a Mickey Terror horror show. Oh, look how cute it is until you see the freaking claws and fangs on these things. This thing looks like it could do damage as a newborn. This thing could give Wolverine a freaking run for his money. Ah. Oklahoma family cat rescues small dog from two coyotes. Well, we're gonna have to watch this show. We are
One
gonna have
lucky
to watch
dog back
this.
to feeling like her.
We're gonna have to watch this because you got the dog barking at the cat. The cats are really terrified. You can tell they're ignoring the dog. Fluffy wants to play with the little critter. All right, let's get to the scene here. While this is going on, let's see if we can show what's happening here. Well, there's the dog, just walking, minding its own business, doing its business outside. Exactly what it's doing. When all of a sudden, oh, it's attacked! Good God! Ah! That's my chew toy. That's a cat saying that's my chew toy. Sloth bears have the highest human killed count of all bears. Might be true, Shrapnel. Don't know. That cat comes out there to save his shit. That's my Fluffy. The heck with that freaking thing. Security cameras recorded the two wild animals went after the much smaller canine, but they fled the scene seconds later when the family's outdoor cat Binks, all right, vaulted over the fence and chased them away. It's inspiring to see just our little outdoor cat just jump at the two coyotes that were attacking this little dog who she loves and run after them. All right. Well, it probably surprised the coyotes. Coyotes are, they're opportunity thieves, all right, and they will kill small dogs and so forth. Um, they can kill the cat too. Okay. Um, so I think the neighbors here better be a little careful because if the coyotes come back, they might be thinking they have a cat on the menu. Just putting it out there. Just putting it out there. All right, folks, that's everything I got for the day. Hope that you all had a good day. Thanks for coming.